Hey, good Thursday morning, everybody. BAM weather meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update, guys. Today, we are going to talk about increasing potential for colder air as we work into the start of November. We still have several weeks of October to go through, but based off of the signals that we see in the North Pacific Ocean, based off the signals we see in our global wind state and our tropical forcing, feeling increasingly confident that following a couple of big storms late October, could get even wintry early in the season to start out the month of November. We'll talk about that as we go throughout this video. Do want to at least start out in the short term to give a quick update here because we do have additional frost and freeze potential as we work into tomorrow morning. Here's a look at low temperatures expected into tomorrow morning. You can see parts of Indiana, Ohio, and then especially into the northeastern part of the country going to see temperatures cold enough to produce a frost or a freeze. I still think it's rather patchy for much of Indiana into Ohio, but certainly especially in those outlying and low-lying areas. And for areas that were able to pick up some rain and still have some moisture on the surface, I think frost will be possible even into eastern Indiana, Ohio as we get into tomorrow morning. More widespread frost and freeze, though, into the interior northeast. Actually, a couple of record-breaking cold lows here across upstate New York, Massachusetts, and into Connecticut. So chilly morning expected tomorrow across the northeastern part of the United States. In terms of the overall pattern ahead, guys, really not expecting notable cold to linger around for any kind of an extended period of time. Warmer than normal temperatures work right back into the forecast as we work into early next week. You can see, especially across the central part of the country, much above normal temperatures from Iowa down through Texas expected. That will shift to the east as we work into the middle part of next week, Tuesday and into Wednesday, guys, with above to, at times, much above normal temperatures for the south central to eastern part of the country. But as we work towards the 16th, 17th, and 18th, we get closer to that time frame where I think the recurving typhoon will reorient the jet stream and we'll have an opportunity for some colder shots of air. I think first there's likely maybe a backdoor cold front, another shot of some cooler air for the east coast as we work into next Thursday and next Friday with much above normal temperatures persisting across the central part of the country. That really hasn't changed. When we're talking about these cold fronts ahead, it's especially across the eastern part of the country rather than the plains, and cooler than normal conditions out on the west coast as well. I think there's a reinforcing shot of some cooler air as we work into next weekend, the 18th and the 19th, that I think can be a little bit more widespread. Now, what you'll notice here with the EPS, it definitely is trying to see it, but it's not all that notable. It's got some cooler than normal temperatures for the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, into parts of the Ohio Valley. It's not that widespread. It's not that notable. The 6C GEFS actually did trend colder. It's also not that widespread, but the trend is your friend here, guys, because if you consider what model data normally does in these situations, they normally don't pick up on the intensity of these cold fronts until really we get within 7 or 8 days when they're associated with the typhoon recurves. So I would be continuing to watch as we get into next weekend for colder trends. If we take a look here at the EPS, I'm going to show this again. This is by next Sunday into Monday, and so I'd say the 18th to the 20th would be the most likely time frame of colder than normal conditions. I think we can continue to see more colder trends in this region and here, but if you're across the south central part of the country, you likely are going to remain warmer than normal. And then with time, if we take a look at the GEFS here, I believe that what will start to happen is milder than normal conditions will begin to fill back in from west to east across the country as we get towards the 23rd and the 24th of the month. And so cold front in the short term, maybe a bigger cold front next weekend that we'll need to keep an eye on for the eastern third of the United States. If you're in the central U.S., probably remaining more consistently warmer than normal outside of the northern plains, which will see this shot of some colder air as we get into early next week before the warmth comes back. Now, getting into the upper level pattern here, guys, there's a couple of things that I want to highlight for you that I think are going to become important as we close out the month of October. So top right here, you all are going to be able to see this, what the time is and the specific time frame. So this is as we work into next Thursday. There's that initial front that will work into the northeast part of the country. We'll have some lows that will work across the northern plains and then dive down to the south and to the east. As we continue to go throughout next weekend, you can see the reinforcing shot of some cooler air. I actually think the upper level pattern may be showing the cooler air a little bit better than the surface temperatures on the data right now. This is by next Saturday. One of the reasons that I do think that data can continue to trend a bit cooler next weekend is because there's a blocking high up over the Hudson Bay and over Greenland. That high will become important because I don't really expect it to break down all the way through the end of the month and into November. It can increase the shots of cooler air for the eastern United States. But there is another thing that I think will become important as we go towards the end of the week 2 period. We scroll this over so it's a little bit easier to see. Note a big trough of cooler air developing over here near Alaska all the way out to western North America. Why is that important? Typically, when you get cold in Alaska, you get warm in the United States. When you get this type of a look, you get a flow of mild Pacific air. And so I do think that even though this model is showing some below normal heights by the end of the period, I think it's probably a little bit too cool. And I think that, between the 24th and the 30th of the month, we're going to have a strong flow of mild Pacific air, and the United States likely gets warmer than normal again in a more widespread fashion. With that as well, I believe that what will happen is your core of moisture will tend to be across the northern tier of the U.S. where that Pacific jet stream influence is going to be. So more moisture opportunities into the week 2 time frame and into the last week of October for the north central part of the country, remaining a bit drier than normal in the eastern portion of the United States. So then the question becomes, we've got these cold shots possible into early week 2. We've got another warm-up that we're targeting shortly after that to end week 2 into week 3. When does the cold come? When do we get a more persistent pattern change? For that, I want to look at our tropical forcing. This is the Madden-Julian Oscillation forecast. It's basically a measure of thunderstorm activity along the equator. It can give us ideas of how the jet stream will shift as we go in time. The forecast ahead, moving through phases 1, 2, and 3 in the short term, and then what starts to happen is we move into phases 4, 5, and 6 as we get into the end of October and into November. Why is that important? Well, number one, I think in the short term, what this is doing is leading to a very extended Pacific jet stream. It's going to lead to a very mild flow of air into the U.S. It's exactly what we just talked about. It also tends to favor a more poleward jet stream, which allows for warmer subtropical air to come further to the north. We need this to change to get colder. If you take a look at MJO Phase 3, you can see that warmer flow of air likely going to continue and actually even redevelop some late week 2 into week 3. However, what will start to happen is as we work into early November and get into MJO Phase 5, that favors colder air here across the eastern part of the country. It would allow the jet to retract back westward and for this ridge to start to develop here over western North America. When you pump up a ridge or warmth in the western half of North America, you tend to get colder shots of air in the east. And so I really think that it's once we get into MJO Phase 5 and MJO Phase 6, we should start to see a pattern change happen. Right now, data indicating we get there by the very end of October, and I think that a big storm system right around Halloween or just before Halloween is going to set off this pattern change. I think between the 24th and 30th, it's going to be warmer. But as we build in this bigger storm system, this bigger cold front right around Halloween, it's going to usher in some much cooler air into the forecast. Let's break this down so you can visualize how we expect this to happen. This is the GEFS Weekly. I think it's seeing it very well. This is by the time we work towards the 23rd, 24th of the month. You can see the milder air returning across the U.S. Wouldn't be shocked if because of some of the high latitude blocking over Greenland, if the East Coast stays seasonable to slightly cooler. But for the rest of the country, probably leaning milder with below normal heating demand. We get a big storm in here right around Halloween, and then look at the cooler air that begins to filter in behind, and it lingers all the way through the first 8 or 9 days of November at least. And so I really think that once we hit the turn of the month, Halloween into November 1st, we're going to have a blast of colder air that comes into the eastern half of the country. Here's how I generally expect things to evolve. The 24th to the 30th, maybe some low-pressure systems to the north, a bigger one around the 30th and the 31st. Before that big storm system, mild Pacific air dominates across the central part of the country, maybe averaging out more seasonable for the East Coast. After that big storm moves through, the first week of November averages out colder than normal for the eastern half of the country with milder air to the west. With this type of a look, especially with some high latitude blocking, higher pressure up here over the Hudson Bay and over Greenland, I would not be shocked. Here's your jet stream look when you get something like this. I would not be shocked if you get some early season wintry weather type of opportunities into the first week of November. It's happened before. I would say certainly if you're across the Great Lakes in the Northeast, maybe a higher chance. But I would say that anywhere across the eastern half of the country, from the Ohio Valley to the Midwest, Great Lakes, Northeast, needs to be keeping an eye on this time frame for the first chances of some kind of wintry mischief. Obviously, that's still a ways out, but given the signal that I see, I'm increasingly confident about a cooler pattern or a colder pattern developing the first week of November, following some of the ups and downs late October. Guys, that's all I have for today's forecast. If you have questions, as usual, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great day.